Hey guys, I'm Kurt Kennedy and I was asked to give you a short brief tutorial on project-based learning or PBLs. I am by no means an expert on this, but I was willing to share what knowledge and what information I have to you, and hopefully it would help you if you choose to do project-based learning in your classroom. Now, I think probably the best way to start off project-based learning or study of this unit would be to look at a short video, about a 3-minute video from the Buck Institute, which is the leader in PBLs, to explain what project-based learning actually is.
You remember what it was like in school. It was boring. You sat in class, memorized as much as you could, and tried to pass a test at the end. But is that good enough? These days, school can be more interesting and effective by focusing students on work that matters. This is project-based learning explained. Most adults live in a world of projects. Whether it's a job assignment, home improvement, or planning a wedding, we need to actively solve problems. But unfortunately, schoolwork looks more like this than this. Let's take a look at this project-based world. Meet Claire. She was recently presented with a challenge. Her company, Super Suds, makes soap, and it was up to her to find the most earth-friendly way to produce it in the future. Her boss gave her a budget and a few requirements, and it was up to her to come up with a solution. She organized and managed a team who researched the options and created materials summarizing the issues. Claire's team asked for feedback and presented their findings to the boss. Claire came out of the project looking like a rock star, and she learned a lot about green products. If you look closely, Claire's success involved critical thinking, collaboration, and communication, things that aren't often taught in traditional classrooms. The world needs more Claires, so how do we get them? The answer is project-based learning, or PBL. By focusing students on a project, teachers put them on a path that deepens their knowledge and builds skills they'll need in the future. Here's what I mean. Mr. Simmons has always been a good science teacher, and his students do well on Friday's tests. Unfortunately, what they learned was gone by Saturday morning. That wasn't good enough for him. Soon he learned about project-based learning and decided to give it a shot. Mr. Simmons got the idea for his first project on microorganisms when nearly half of his students were suddenly absent with the flu. He asked his students why they thought so many of their classmates got sick at the same time. That lively discussion produced a lot of good questions and a list of things the kids wanted to know. Mr. Simmons then announced their project was to help elementary school kids understand how can we not get sick. After dividing the class into teams, he got them started on the project. It was up to the students to ask questions, research, collaborate, give each other feedback, and figure out the best ways to make their points clear to children. One team chose to make an educational video on the connection between hand washing and avoiding the flu. Another chose to create posters to show how viruses spread. The project teams showed off their final work to an enthusiastic audience of parents and their children at a nearby elementary school. Sitting in the front row was our good friend and local rock star Claire, who saw a bit of herself in the students. It was clear that the project was a success for the students, the audience, and Mr. Simmons. His students practiced critical thinking, collaboration, and communication. The project wasn't about memorization, but learning in depth about viruses and how to prevent spreading disease, a lesson they will never forget. At the end of the presentation, Claire introduced herself to the students and told them that they were rock stars and that the world needs more people who can think like them. To learn more about project-based learning, go to BIE.org.
I think the video is a good little introduction to how project-based learning can be effective. It's kind of silly here, the little cartoon, but basically you're trying to not only give knowledge to the students, but allow them to apply it so that it becomes relevant to their life and they remember it better because it does have some relevancy. Now this is a diagram from the Buck Institute, and it kind of has the 7 steps that they use in project-based learning, and I'm going to go through each one of these steps, but I'll just briefly tell you You start with a driving question. That's sort of like the unifying theme throughout your project. Need to know, that's what you want students to learn. Inquiry and innovation, how you want students to actually learn it on their own. You're going to incorporate 21st century skills. You're going to give students a choice in the project. You're not going to give them just one project they can do. Let them figure out exactly how they want to do it, like a video, a paper, or a product at the end. They're going to have feedback and revision as they go through, usually with rubrics, and they're going to have some type of presentation at the end. Publicly would be the best. Now let's go through each one of them a little bit more in depth. The driving question is what captures the student's attention, and the driving question needs to not be an closed-ended question. It can't be yes or no. It needs to be open-ended. And oftentimes there's not an answer to it. Like I have a good friend of mine who's doing a PBL on obesity and obesity awareness. He's getting the students to learn about obesity, and then they're going to make their community or their school aware of ways to prevent it. It doesn't have one set answer at the end. So that's kind of the driving question. That's sort of the kind of driving question you need to have. But now you want to have a driving question to be able to link it to the concepts that you would normally teach, because as many of you are, I am an EOC teacher, and I have certain topics I have to cover, and I have to cover them for that test. So I want my driving question to link as many of those concepts together as I can, so that I'm covering the material that's required of me. Now, some characteristics of a driving question, if it's provocative or challenging the students, to make it relevant, try to think of something around them, something in their lives. Of course, that's going to make students more enthusiastic about the idea of the project and want to learn. Open-ended, as I've already stated, is very important, and it needs to already be linked to what you want the students to learn. The need to know, we're going to start off most projects with an entry event. The entry event is kind of like getting the students excited about what you're fixing to learn. A lot of teachers can use field trips, guest speakers. You could use movie clips. You could use a story. You could use personal stories of your own about whatever idea you have, but something that's going to get the students thinking about what you want them to think about and make them excited about the prospect of what they might be learning. The third point, I think this is one of the most important points in a project-based learning, is to give students a choice and a voice into what they're doing. Not every student learns exactly the same way. So by giving them a choice, you allow them to do things that they enjoy, and you're going to get a better product in the end by doing that. So be very careful about limiting what you allow them to do. They might come up with something that you've never thought of before. We definitely want to incorporate 21st century skills, collaboration, that's why they're going to be working in groups, communicating, that's the whole deal of being in collaborative groups, critical thinking, and the use of technology. We want to include these in there as much as possible, because this is what they're going to use in the workplace when they leave our high schools. Inquiry and innovation, when I think about this one, we want it to be relevant to the students' lives in some way, but we also want them to be scientists and inventors on their own. In a science classroom, it's really easy. They can actually do the experiments themselves, gather the data, report it, etc. But you don't want students to just be able to go to the internet, print off documents on the internet, and be done. You want them to have to figure out stuff on their own and be student-led. Okay. Feedback and revision. This is very important. You need to set up through your rubric system by allowing students to give other students feedback on what they're doing, and even you could give feedback to those students. Allow them to revise it and do it over again and over again. What you're going to end up doing by giving them a chance to do revisions throughout is that you're going to end up with a better product at the end, because during these revisions you'll be able to lead them in the directions you want them to go. The last one, the public presented product. This is what the Buck Institute says is the most important. Now, when I think of publicly presented PBLs in my classroom, it doesn't mean I've got to go get somebody from the community every time. Now, if I did, that would be wonderful. But I could get another teacher or another classroom of students to look at the presentation. I just believe if you get the students to present their products to someone then besides their own class, that you'll get a better product in the end because they want to impress the peers and the other teachers, so they'll actually work a little bit harder. Now, there's some language things we need to know when we're talking about PBL. The first two I've already introduced to you. The entry event, when I talk about that, that's something that launches the product or the idea. A lot of you already do this already. You know, it's something you're trying to make them excited about what you're fixing to teach. But we just use the word entry event for that excitement. Driving question or the DQ. The DQ is what you want them to know or what you're going to be doing, and it's going to lead them to their final product, and it's going to lead them through all the concepts that you want them to follow. Now, here's one that kind of is different. Workshops. Workshops are simply lectures that you do already, but we would use the word workshops in PBL. So if I had a collaborative group and they were working and I wanted to do a workshop on cloning, let's say, I'd say, okay guys, let's do a cloning workshop real quick, have a 5 to 10 minute lecture on cloning, and let them go back to work. So that would be a little workshop that they would go to. Things to think about when starting a PBL, you need to begin with the end in mind. You know, what do you want them to do? What do you want them to learn? What will products look like at the end? Once you have this, then you can figure out how to connect everything with a driving question. You also need to think about your resources. You know, we are limited in our funds. We're limited in the resources we have, but there's more out there than you think. You know, you need to start out by thinking about the different individuals in your school that have knowledge on the topic you're talking about, different individuals in the county, maybe at the university, NC State, etc., that could help you out. And then you need to think of some type of engaging way to launch the project. I think the entry point is one of the most important things about the PBL. These are just some random thoughts that I come up with while I was doing my PBLs. You know, you need to do assessment throughout, not at the end. Traditionally, we teach Chapter 1, have a test, Chapter 2, have a test. PBLs are going to kind of have assessments built in. They could be papers that are going to be handed in or little short quizzes. I mean, ever how you decide to do it, but the assessments throughout, formative, summative, you know, either way will work. You know, realize you're not going to be following the curriculum step by step by step. You designed a project in which that the students will learn what they need to know when they need to know it, and this makes it more relevant to them. But that's the hard part about figuring out how to make that driving question that will lead them where you want them to go and make sure they cover everything they need to cover. You need to list down the objectives you want them to learn whenever you're trying to decide or make a driving question, and then figure out a driving question that will link all these objectives. That's probably the hardest part to me. And then you need entry documents for every new concept. I have a genetic PBL that I'm doing, and it links 4 chapters together, and I actually have 3 different entry documents, kind of an entry document at each point. And an entry document will basically, for example, one of my entry documents is that they've been accepted into a university, but in order to actually start to attend the university, they have to do 3 different things. Those 3 things are things they would do already in class. You know, a certain worksheet they have to do, like on Punnett squares, a certain lab activity they have to do on getting DNA. I don't know, a certain research they have to do on genetically modified organisms. So they have to do these three things and hand it in. So that's kind of how I'm assessing throughout the project, and it will give them, entry documents will make sure you have a way to lead them back to where you want them to go. So when the very first PBL I ever did, this is the idea of how I did it. I started out with the resources that I knew I had around me. Then I thought of the idea, realized we're bound by time and resources. We can't do anything we want to do because we don't have all the resources, but we're also bound by time. You know, I did that. I was talking about that 4-chapter genetics PBL that I was doing. I know how long it normally takes me, and I'm an EOC teacher, so I have a certain amount of time that I can spend on genetics. I can't let this project go for 6 months. I mean, that's not feasible. So I have to make sure that my product and my project can be done in a timely manner. You need to have a big idea that they see every day, and you know, this is your driving question, your DQ, is that idea. You need to have a final product that they're going to do that's going to, it does not have to be graded for content. It could be graded by how they work with their group, but you do have to have some type of final product at the end. Now, when I speak of that, a product is not going to be a birdhouse or a chair or something like that that's actually built. A product could be a video, it could be a presentation, it could be a pamphlet, it could be a paper, it could be conducting a lab experiment and handing a lab report on their own. These are things that you already do in your classroom. Just figure out how to incorporate them into a question that links you to that point. Assessments are going to be formative, summative, and the product itself, something throughout the project. You need to figure out when you get the driving question, you need to ask the students what they need to know to get to that point, to answer this driving question. Make sure you put that on the board so they can see those every day. That would be topics, basically. Like, for example, if I asked them what they need to know to be a genetic counselor, they might bring up what is genetics, and then I might lead them in, well, if you know genetics, then you need to know DNA, RNA, transcription, and I would list these things on the board, and they realize they've got to know these things in order to be able to answer the question. They need to have rubrics that lead them through the process because it is so open-ended. You do need to have some parameters on it so that you're able to get a product like you want. You create groups. Some teachers allow the students to do it. Some teachers group them in different ways. It really doesn't matter how you group the students together. Group them best because you know your students better than anybody else. But I do recommend a group contract of some sort so every person knows exactly what they're supposed to do within that group. You need to have some type of management system. Now, this is your entry documents, is your management system. The entry documents, remember, is what you give to the students and it directs them through the product. And then you need to have a time for reflection. What would they have done differently? How could they have changed it, etc. after you get done with the project. Now, if any of you are interested in project-based learning, the Buck Institute is like the guru of PBLs. It's www.bie.org. I recommend going to it, make an account, sign up for an account. It's free. And then go to the PBL Do-It-Yourself. It has a great tutorial on PBLs, and it walks you through, gives you worksheets, etc. I hope this helped a little bit. If I can help in any way, don't hesitate to contact me, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.